Women on the Front Lines Conference WOFL 2016. إنه من أبرز إنجازات مؤسسة ميشيديا مؤتمر سنوي تنظمه ميشيديا فاونديشن MCF في إطار الدفاع عن حقوق المرأة تحت عنوان نساء على خطوط المواجهة، حيث يتم في خلاله تسليط الضوء على إنجازات نساء تميزن فبرعن. وقبل الغوص في صفحات السنوات السابقة لهذا المؤتمر لنتوقف سوياً عند لمحة سريعة لأبرز إنجازات MCF. استكملت ميشيديا فاونديشن عام 2009 مسيرتها بالعطاء الثقافي والاجتماعي والتربوي بتأسيس معهد تدريبي إعلامي MCF Media Institute يقدم برامج تدريبية عالية الجودة في مجال الإعلام المكتوب والمرئي والمسموع والإلكتروني، من أهدافه ردم الهوة بين عالم الأكاديميا وسوق العمل وبناء جيل إعلامي جديد يعي مسؤولياته تجاه الكلمة الحرة في وطن الاختلاف والتنوع. مع اقتراب الفصل الأخير من كل عام تحيي مؤسسة ميشيديا حفل توزيع جوائز تكريمية في مجال الإعلام، وتتوزع جوائز MCF Media Award Ceremony على 4 فئات تمنح لصحفيين من مختلف بلدان أنحاء العالم تقديراً لمسيرتهم وشجاعتهم وإنجازاتهم والتزامهم. ومن أبرز نشاطات ميشيديا فاونديشن والتي جعلتها علامة فارقة في المشهد الثقافي اللبناني مؤتمر FCM السنوي. تنظم MCF بالتعاون مع مؤسسة فريدريك أبرت ستيفتونغ الألمانية مؤتمر تواصل الأدمغة الحرة Free Connected Minds FCM الذي يجتمع تحت سقفه خبراء واختصاصيون من مختلف المجالات لمناقشة الإعلام الحديث والتقليدي وتأثير العالم الرقمي على التوجهات الفكرية بأبعادها الاجتماعية والسياسية والاقتصادية، إضافة إلى أبرز الإطلالات اللافتة كتلك الأخيرة للأمين العام السابق لجامعة الدول العربية ووزير خارجية مصر السابق السيد عمرو موسى في حديث خاص أجرته معه الإعلامية جيزال الخوري تطرق فيه إلى آخر مستجدات العالم العربي.
وأنا واحد من المؤمنين بأنه اللي أضاع العالم العربي كله هو سوء إدارة الحكم.
أما للنساء الرائدات منصة إعلامية خاصة لتبادل الخبرات وقصص النجاح على مختلف الأصعدة السياسية والاقتصادية والثقافية والاجتماعية. سيدات من لبنان والعالم استضافتهن مؤسسة ميشيديا لمناقشة الفرص والتحديات والخروج بطروحات مفيدة لتحسين واقع المرأة. عام 2013 كانت في نسخة ووفل الأولى ندوات بارزة كتلك التي ضمت ولأول مرة سيدات أوائل سابقات هن جويس جميل، منى الهريوي ونيلة معوض، حاورهن الإعلامي مارسيل غانم الذي خاض معهن في تحديات الظروف الصعبة التي واكبت جمهورية الاختلاف والتنوع. وكانت ندوة تحت عنوان الدبلوماسيات في ظل تغيرات العالم العربي، ثم ندوة عنوانها مراسلات في مناطق النزاع. أما ووفل 2 فكان له وقع خاص مع إطلالة حصرية للسيدة الأولى سيسيليا أتياس، وشمل أيضا محاور عدة كفقرة نساء في مجال التقديم التلفزيوني ونساء شاركن تجاربهن في المساعدات الإنسانية، الطب، الاقتصاد والأعمال كفقرة نساء يصنعن التغيير في العالم العربي.
Ce matin, je remplis avec joie et bonheur l'engagement de venir vous dire chez vous combien ce que vous faites est admirable.
أخيراً وليس آخراً، مؤتمر Women on the Front Lines في نسخته الثالثة 2015 حيث أذهلت الإعلامية الفرنسية كلير شازال الحضور بعفويتها ووسعة معرفتها، وكانت لا تزال في عز تألقها عبر TF1، إضافة إلى أسماء عديدة أخرى لها وقعها مثل جيم كلينسي من CNN، وسياسيات من مصر وتونس ولبنان، وخبيرات في عالم المال من المصارف اللبنانية والبنك الدولي، ونشطات لم يبخلن بوقتهن وقدراتهن لدعم قضايا اجتماعية، ومراسلات لم يهبن المخاطر في ساحات المعارك. فأهلا وسهلا بكم في عالم كل امرأة حلمت، بادرت بالابتكار فدفعت ثمن المثابرة وحققت. WOFL is back. تنظم مؤسسة MCF مؤتمرها السنوي الرابع Women on the Front Lines بحضور نخبة من أهل الاختصاص WOFL 2016 في الأول من آذار في نيسيا بيروت. للتسجيل eventbrite.com. فإذا الجلسة الأولى رح تكون تحت عنوان النساء في عالم الشؤون الدولية في ظل أزمة اللاجئين السوريين، ويدير الجلسة وزير الداخلية والبلديات الأسبق في لبنان زياد بارود.
صباح الخير. I'm honored and pleased to be part of this gathering and to be on the front lines where women take the lead. This octagon, which is supposed to be inclusive, tells a lot. We're turning our back to many, and the majority of those we are turning our back to are women. This is how it is today. Many men, and at the same time, those people are supporting and backing up the huge work that is being done in order to make things go into a better direction. I will start immediately with this panel that is focused on women in international affairs and with the focus on the Syrian immigration crisis. I am surrounded by 4 women. I'm not complaining, the contrary. And I would like to welcome Her Excellency Ms. Yamina Benguigui, former French minister in charge of francophonie. Et je vais immédiatement tourner vers le français pour vous dire que la francophonie n'est pas dans ses meilleurs jours, si vous le permettez. Vous êtes mieux placé que moi pour le savoir. Mais je crois que la francophonie qui est sur un triple front également, un front linguistique qui est lié au commerce international, puisque l'anglais, c'est la langue du commerce international, le front des social media, donc des réseaux sociaux, et aussi peut-être un front de valeurs que la francophonie reflète. Je voudrais avoir un peu votre avis sur la femme sur ces fronts, pas que la francophonie. Et je crois que vous êtes, par votre expérience, votre engagement, vous êtes bien placé pour nous dire un peu ce que vous en pensez.
Merci. Alors déjà, juste une petite réponse sur la francophonie. Nous serons 850 millions de locuteurs en 2050, dont 80% en Afrique. Donc, ça veut dire que la langue française est aussi une langue africaine et qu'elle est la langue, elle sera la langue aussi de ce continent important qui est aussi un avenir. Le continent africain a un avenir économique et je pense que ce sera cette langue, la langue française, si elle est confortée, parce qu'elle a tendance à effectivement s'effriter, mal apprise, elle est de moins en moins consolidée, alors que c'est une langue d'avenir et c'est non seulement une langue culturelle, mais surtout une langue économique. Voilà, ça c'est pour le volet. J'ai fait le point sur la francophonie. Quant à... juste en 2 mots, je pense que je me situe comme une femme engagée, une ministre, j'ai été une ministre engagée et je suis une cinéaste engagée. Et j'ai essayé de mixer le tout pendant le temps de ma mandature et j'ai pu faire évoluer la situation sur le droit des femmes dans l'espace francophone, dont j'ai combattu le viol de guerre, cette arme abominable qui est pratiquée dans beaucoup d'États, comme en République démocratique du Congo, où l'arme fatale, c'est le viol des femmes. Voilà.
Très bien, on reviendra vers vous. Madame Sosan Roshi, Director of the United Nations Information Center in the MENA region, Egypt. How does the media respond to the challenges that are facing women on the front lines? You are in a position to tell a bit about how does the media reflect what is going on and how the media is able to take things in a different direction.
It depends. Media is very broad. I mean, are you talking about Arab media in specific, or are you talking about international media? Because I think the international media gives more attention to women on the front lines. They try to raise women's issues higher than Arabic media in specific. So we cannot brand media as one. So, and also there's social media where sufferings and life stories of women are shared. But when it comes to mainstream media, they're usually, politics takes precedence over women's stories that are always seen as more feature-ish rather than news value.
Okay. So a lot has to be done on this, in this field.
A lot has to be done. I think also we have to be very careful because the media's job is to cover the news. So we can't ask the media to go outside covering the news, but it is through allowing women to have more voices, it's through having women more and more on the front lines, it's through raising issues that are related to women, to making them more real. Like our job at the UN is to give a human interest to every story, because the media likes a human face to a story rather than just facts and figures. Statistics are good, but they're not enough. But the main thing I think we should focus on is how to build the capacities of women to be able to speak to media, to train them how to be more politically engaged so that they can be part of making just the agenda and not being covered by the agenda. And that's where the line, I think now we're covered, we're part of the subject, but we're not making the news. And I think this is where a lot needs to be done.
Thank you. Sigrid. Sigrid Kag is the Undersecretary General and Special Coordinator for Lebanon. You're one of those who make things happen, in a way. I would like to tackle with you the UN Security Council resolution that goes back to 2000. 1325 and then 1820 and 1889. To what extent those resolutions that are linked to peacekeeping, to women participation in this process, to what extent do you believe that the implementation of those resolutions were really effective?
That's a tough question. As you know, we've just done a report on it, but I'd like to go back one step first. Resolutions are one thing. It's all about member states and society's willingness, the political will, which is essential to make changes on the ground. The UN can support. What we see, however, is still a glaring absence of women in political life across the board. Less than 25% globally, women are parliamentarians, of all parliamentarians. We only have 13 heads of states globally, and 11 heads of government. So if you look at 50% of the world's population and their significant structural underrepresentation, a resolution on top of that is nice, is important, but it won't be the big game changer. The game changer starts nationally by getting women quotas, women support by men for women to be part of political life, for women's voices to be heard. Then a resolution, particularly in times of conflict, can be that extra notion where we say we focus on gender as human rights, we focus on protection, and we focus on change. But change doesn't come only from the victims. The victims need to be supported, need to be encouraged, and need to be protected. So we look at it from a human rights perspective. You know there's been a report that looks back 15 years when 1325 was adopted and now. And actually, I just read it again to refresh my own memory, although this should be my bread and butter. And I'm looking at the language used, which is still the same. Gender equality, protection from gender-based violence. And you feel that we haven't traveled far enough and fast enough. And I would say we need to make that the new headline, precisely because also with radical ideology, extremist movements now, subjugation of women and young girls again is becoming the new headline for the news, but it means we collectively failed. So I think it's a cup half full, but also half empty. And in the 21st century, it's unacceptable that we still need to talk about what to do for women. We need to look at what we can do for humankind and what we do for boys and girls. But clearly, we haven't come far enough. So I'm here to do that with all of you.
So we need to be more proactive.
We need to be more proactive, we need to be more courageous, we need to be bold, we need to have news on our side. We shouldn't be, news is only news when we failed. We should be out there to look at the change and the transformation. And it needs policy, it needs support, and it needs a lot of men. That's why we have campaigns that are he for she. If I may look around the room, and I see actually the dwindling, and thank you, Dick, and the ambassador of Jordan, for instance, I see the first faces, ambassador of Bangladesh. All the men, a lot of the men, God bless them, have left because now it's a women's talk and there are 4 women and you're a courageous man, Ziad. We're all on a panel. This shouldn't be. Not on. If women's issues are central, the men should be here all the time. So I rest my case. But thank you, Ziad.
Agree. I totally agree. I would add that men are responsible for what the situation is because they are those who are decision makers so far. So it's their own responsibility. Dr. Maha Yahya is Carnegie Senior Associate, Middle East, and you have been working a lot on development issues and sustainable development. To what extent do you believe that sustainable development goes through women empowerment, women participation in public life?
Well, without women being at the heart of development, there is no development. I mean, it's as simple as that. And the fact that we're so behind on so many development indicators, whether it's health, whether it's education, is an indication. But before I get into that, I just want to follow up a little bit on what Sigrid and Sausan were pointing to, which is that women make headlines when they are victims. And there are women, unfortunately, in the current conflicts in this region, they are on the front line as victims of sexual abuse, of rape, of enslavement. We're seeing the return of practices that were eradicated centuries ago. So, however, the women who are not making the headlines are the women who are also on the front line, who are fighting to keep their communities together, who are bearing the brunt of keeping their families together, because a lot of the men are fighting, who are struggling to make sure that their children survive and live to see another day, but who are also active on the ground in civil defense, in getting aid to refugees, in all sorts of support networks. Other women who are also not making it to the news are the women who are trying to make a difference in their own communities, even communities that are not in conflict. I'll take one example, since we have quite a few Tunisian participants, is one of the most important, perhaps, and significant civil society organizations in Tunis today is Al-Bawsala, which maintains
You're good.
I'm good. Which maintains oversight over parliamentary and overlooks what Parliament is doing on a day-to-day basis and reports on it under the Freedom of Information Act. This foundation, this organization was founded by women. And there are many others like it across the region. Lebanon has plenty of examples. Ziad, you of all people, because you've been the lawyer who's been registering a lot of these NGOs, you know how many women have been at the front line. So yes, without women, and these stories are also part of a development story. Without these women, there is no development and there's no pushing forward.
And what about women fighting, fighters who are in the field? What do you think of them? How do you see their...
I think in many ways they are, I mean, why are we, they are no different from men in the sense that they are fighting for a cause that they believe in. I mean, perhaps they're not as numerous. Sorry?
Survival or...
Not necessarily survival. Women are not always victims. They also have principles and they also have positions and they are also fighting for things that they believe in. The fact that there aren't as many women on the front line in combat roles as there are men perhaps says a lot about gender differences and the way they deal with conflict. I don't want to be essentialist, but women tend to want to negotiate find solutions, find the middle ground, find a place where you can bring people on board, I think, overall. But yes, it says a lot. But I wouldn't signal out women as different from men. They also have principles and they're not necessarily victims.
Thank you. Je reviens vers vous. Madame Kak a mentionné les mécanismes qui pourraient aider à ce que la femme puisse avoir un rôle nettement plus important. Vous venez d'un pays qui a connu le système de quotas. Vous venez d'un pays où la femme est présente dans la vie publique. Qu'est-ce que vous pouvez nous dire à propos des mécanismes et comment est-ce que ces mécanismes peuvent être mis en place alors que les hommes ne sont pas tous de cet avis? Comment est-ce que la société civile a un rôle dans ce sens? Les groupes de pression? Comment vous voyez les choses?
Alors effectivement, je viens d'un pays, la France, où il y a une volonté politique de mettre des quotas en place pour avoir un nombre, par exemple, de ministres, de députés, etc. Mais je suis aussi originaire d'une contrée, d'un continent africain. Je suis d'origine algérienne, où je n'oublie pas que, par exemple, une femme peut être ministre, mais si elle veut se marier, elle a besoin de l'autorisation de son père, s'il n'y a pas de père, du frère, de l'oncle, etc. Et quand on arrive au bout de la ligne, on doit nommer un tuteur. Je n'oublie pas que dans tout le bassin du Congo, lorsque une femme peut être avocat, ministre, etc., mais lorsqu'elle perd son mari et qu'elle devient veuve, on lui retire absolument tout. Tout. Elle appartient, elle est un meuble, elle appartient à la fratrie. Donc beaucoup de droits. Donc moi, en ayant cette double culture, j'essaye, même en France, de continuer à me battre pour que dans le reste du monde, pour que les femmes puissent acquérir ce genre de droits. Mais il faut savoir qu'en France, il y a une volonté politique. Mais dans les us et coutumes, lorsque vous arrivez à l'Assemblée nationale et que vous êtes une femme, vous avez honte des hommes qui sont présents, tellement il y a un machisme ambiant. On vous siffle, on se moque de vous, mais en tant que femme, c'est connu ce que je raconte là, mais c'est tellement présent, c'est-à-dire que cet homme, si vous le rencontrez dans la rue, vous lui mettez une gifle. Mais là, vous subissez parce que vous êtes dans un lieu important, vous êtes filmé en permanence, mais les colibés sifflent de partout. Donc
c'est culturel aussi.
Il y a la loi et il y a aussi ces us et coutumes, c'est-à-dire il faut aussi lutter contre les préjugés. Il faut, alors évidemment, pour que les femmes, pour qu'un pays arrive à une parité, de toute façon, la loi doit être là. Et ensuite, on doit travailler sur les préjugés. Mais comme disait Einstein, il est plus facile de désagréger un atome qu'un préjugé.
Absolument. En deux mots, Madame Engui, le continent africain, qui est riche en ressources humaines d'abord et ensuite naturelles, où est la femme dans ce continent, dans la sphère politique? Est-ce que vous pensez que dans les années à venir, les décennies à venir, comment la femme africaine va-t-elle pouvoir affronter les grands défis qui s'annoncent déjà?
Écoutez, la femme est le baromètre implacable d'une société. Si les femmes sont maltraitées, on les laisse sur le bas-côté, il n'y aura pas de miracle économique, c'est impossible. Maintenant, le continent africain doit travailler non seulement sur la place de la femme, mais surtout sur les conditions de vie. Et nous sommes en pleine régression des droits. Nous l'avons vu en Tunisie. Tout à l'heure, j'espère qu'on aura le message de Madame Driss Zora. Mais on le voit dans les pays africains comme le Mali, comme le Nigeria, le Cameroun. Enfin, il y a aujourd'hui les extrémistes et l'islamisme arrivent et va de plein droit sur les femmes. Donc, moi, j'ai monté un forum quand j'étais ministre qui s'appelle le Forum mondial des femmes francophones. Alors, j'ai trouvé un biais, c'est-à-dire, nous ne pouvons pas faire d'ingérence dans les pays. On ne peut pas aller voir frontalement un chef de l'État et lui dire ben voilà, la situation de la femme chez vous, etc. Est-ce qu'on peut aider? Est-ce qu'on peut faire? J'ai décidé de me dire qu'il y avait une femme francophone. C'est pratiquement toute l'Afrique, tout le continent africain francophone. Les droits des femmes sont en pleine régression à partir des conflits, les conflits armés, les problèmes religieux. Il y a une régression sur le droit des femmes. Donc, quand j'arrive et que j'arrive dans un pays comme cette année au Congo, mais l'année dernière j'étais en République démocratique du Congo, je demande officiellement que le président de la République annonce une avancée sur les femmes. Sinon, je ne viens pas. Mais je viens avec 3000 femmes, hein, donc bon. En général, ils acceptent. Et l'année dernière a été votée au Parlement la loi sur la parité politique, c'est-à-dire qu'aujourd'hui, en République démocratique du Congo, sur les listes électorales, il y aura 30% de femmes alors qu'il y en avait 0. Donc voilà.
C'est une avancée.
C'est de la solidarité féminine, c'est de la solidarité politique parce que c'est impensable d'avancer sans emmener les femmes.
Absolument. Et nous sommes à 4,6% dans le monde arabe.
Oui.
Voilà. Bon, dans le monde arabe. I would like to challenge an idea that you mentioned a couple of minutes ago. You were saying that media is about coverage, stories, news. Where does media stand when it comes to social media, when it comes to people that have become journalists and media persons on their smartphone? So how do you think you can, what is the interaction between this kind of new media, if I may put it this way, and your traditional way of dealing with issues and stories?
Yeah. I just want to take one step back, and when I was talking about the mainstream media in general and covering news, the whole concept of covering news as journalists is you should cover news objectively. And this is something that, so whatever happens, you should lay it out to the public as you think the most objective way possible that it happened. What we're seeing now, mainly in terms of Arab media, is that you're seeing politicization of the media. So it's rare that you can actually watch a TV channel and it does not portray an opinion of one side versus the other. And this is where you find that women's stories disappear because it's no longer about covering the news or what's happening on the ground. It's more about making a political point and a political stance that supports whichever media you're backing. So this is a huge problem. So we don't have objective media. In the very few, they're very, I don't want to say there's zero objectivity in the Arab world, but it's very, very minimum and needs to be beefed up. And this is one thing that we are working on at the UN a lot, is to try to do capacity building for journalists and for media companies and how to cover news objectively and to go back not to be part of the conflict but covering the conflict. Unfortunately, the media today is part of the conflict. Now, when it comes to social media themselves are part of the conflict because you're becoming a citizen journalist based on what you saw. You're not trained. When I was with the UN supervision mission in Syria the first time, we had a huge problem because our stories was to cover the facts on the ground. We made sure that we never said anything that we didn't see. We didn't anticipate something to happen and put it down. We didn't analyze. We analyzed for ourselves, but when we didn't put our analysis down. We saw somebody bleeding, we said we saw somebody bleeding. Somebody was burned, we saw some. If we did not see in our own eyes who covered that story, we would not say who I mean, if we do not see who actually committed the crime or the attack, we would not point fingers. Even if we knew 90% who did it, we would not point fingers because we weren't 100% sure. At the same time, you had citizen journalists or parties to the conflict doing their own reporting on social media, which was extremely challenging. And this is a discussion that we had later on when I went back to the States. I was invited to UCLA for a discussion on social media and coverage in terms of in news situations such as this. And I think we're in the traditional media. Sometimes I wear my own hat as an old traditional CNN person and sometimes as the UN. But in the people who actually worked in the traditional media and are working now are struggling with when do you take news that's coming through social media as factual news and when not to, and also what mitigating steps do you put in place, what steps do you take to make sure that this news is covered. So what the most we could come out with is that if we to follow the sources, and if you start believing the source, if they usually tend to give information that's accurate, you still don't trust it. You go back again and you check from other sources that people on the ground, you can check with the UN, you can check with civil society, did this happen? So basically, use it as a source that you would use, if it's a trusted social media source, use it as a source that you would use if it's an official person. As a journalist, you need to get 3 sources to confirm an event or something happened. So you need to get another source other than the social media source.
Okay, so if we would like to focus a bit on the Syrian crisis, how do you see women in the media dealing with this crisis? Both immigrants and victims and...
It's huge. The women are part, like Sagred said, women are part of everyday society. So you have women who are part of the government, women who are part of political parties, women who are victims, women who are part of foreign fighters. You know that 20 to 30% of foreign fighters are women. So I mean, so they're part of the whole fabric of what's happening in Syria. You can, it's very hard to say how are women being covered. If you talk about the Arab media specifically, they're not being covered because the Arab media is not focusing even on victims. Forget, yes. They're not focusing on human rights. They're focusing on political parties. But if you're talking on social media, again, they're covered as complete victims. They're covered as the women who are being raped, as early child marriages, as forced marriages, as sexual enslavement. But they're never part of the solution. And we know very well, if you look at studies, not that are just done in Syria, but are done globally, when you put women part of the solution, things change drastically. If women are part of the prevention and peacemaking, the chance of the peace deal to last longer is 23% higher than if women are not part of that the negotiation process. We know that even in settlement courts in the US, settlements, out-of-court settlements, that has nothing to do with politics, women have a 20% chance higher of getting cases settled out of court than men. We also know that women have the highest settling cases rather than men. I'm not saying women are better or not. It's basically you have men who also have high rates of settling cases, and you have women who don't. But we're talking about general skills. If you include women with men, you're diversifying your skill sets. That's what we're trying to say. The more diversified the skill sets you have, the more smarter the group becomes. The more smarter the group becomes, the better the decisions that they make. The better the decisions that they make, the better the chances for peace to take place and for peace to last. And don't forget, women in our nature, not all of us, again, I hate to put stereotypes. Women, the majority of women in their nature is they're wired to communicate. And they're wired to look at things in an interrelated manner. Men more compartmentalize. I think adding the interconnectionness of things and the idea of communicating and looking at relation dynamics into any factor, whether it's peacemaking, whether it's development, whether it's peace building, it's all, or even in news, all of that together makes a group smarter and therefore the product better.
Thank you. Well, the Secretary General has been increasingly appointing significantly more women in leading positions at the UN. This is something that you believe could make things work differently? And this is my first question. Second question is related to the Syrian crisis and its impact on Lebanon in particular, do you think that the Lebanese community, hosting community, was able to address the challenges differently with its diverse composition, or how do you see it?
Okay, thank you. Well, I think the first one is, yes, the Secretary General has made it a priority in his mandate on his 2 terms to secure more women, merit-based, of course, more women at the right places. That's happening, but it remains a very fragile statistic, because a study was done recently. You'll see again there's actually been a regression. Whilst I hate to contradict the aspiration, there are actually less women now at the top in the UN, because the ones appointed were all succeeded again by men. And there's only 7% of women in senior leadership positions in the field, including in peace and security. So it's also hard, this by way of saying it's also hard for the UN, despite our charter, despite our ambitions, to make this happen. That requires succession management. It requires better coaching, support, and encouragement for women. It also comes back, I think, in a way to national politics, member states themselves. If member states do not have a quota for women, if you do not find in the international bodies women represented at all levels, there is not that nurturing and supportive environment. So we have to take the long strategic view, but we are allowed to be impatient on the changes we want to see now. That's why I think, for instance, the campaign for a female Secretary General, and we need the best Secretary General. It may be a he, maybe a she. But the campaign itself already has tremendous value to say 7 decades on for human rights, and gender is all about human rights, a human rights-based organization. It can't be that after 70 years of existence, we can't find one qualified woman to lead after 6 or 7 male Secretary Generals. That's one. And it's the same for national politics, but it's the same system that this is pulled from. When it comes from Syria or any peace negotiation, and as Sousan said, if you look at the pictures of the table, the negotiations between Vienna and Geneva and elsewhere, if Federica Mogherini is absent, we don't see women at the table at all. So I think that's an issue. We need to have women not only as an advisory council, we need them to be included in the different groups. Now that's a Syrian process, so we don't want to prejudge that, but as an international community, we can continuously remind and give voice to women. If they're not at the table, we need to make sure that their issues and voices are heard. But Sousan's right, statistically, chances of conflict resolution holding and being more sustainable is proven by the inclusion of women. And it's not just the family issues or education or health. It's actually how you construct society, how you prevent conflict from reoccurring. And Syria is our worst drama, our worst human tragedy since World War II. It is also the chance and challenge for the international community to get it right. And I think we need to focus with that, on that. And last but not least, I really want to come back again, the new undermining and the subjugation, the new forms of enslavement of women in zones of conflict is the challenge of the 21st century for the international community. Our charters, our conventions become very meaningless. They become old and dusted papers if we do not fight this heads-on. And last but not least, and May knows this, I've personally promised myself to no longer go on all-male panels, and I invite everybody who's invited to all-male panels to push the envelope and say there are plenty of other qualified women you can also invite. Thank you, May. Doesn't mean we need to be 50% and Ziad has to put up with us, but there are plenty of panels where diversity can be built. Diversity starts back home. It also starts in Lebanon, and maybe one last point, well, I think it's my last 30 seconds. Municipal elections. Here's the chance to have a quota for women to go for national elections. Municipal elections with women.
Well, we had a draft law in 2010 that where quota was part of the reforms that we're advocating for. Maha, do you think that municipal elections will put women in Lebanon on the front line of decision-making, at least locally?
I think if they aren't, then this country is doomed. I'm sorry. They need to be at the front line, and if we are to move forward towards the Lebanon that we all want, we all wish for, but we're not seeing.
But how to make it happen at a time when political parties are not really pushing forward and getting things? I mean, not all political parties. I'm not saying that this is a general issue, but somehow it's still, you know, 5% to 10%, which is nothing. So
I think
how to put some pressure in order to get things
well, encouraging existing political parties to push forward on this is one item. Creating new political parties, exactly. Creating new coalitions that don't say, actually, it's not time for women's issues now. It's not time to actually look at women's rights. The citizenship law, it's not quite the right time to talk about this because there are so many other more important things happening. There's a conflict in the region, there's a conflict in the country, there's a regional tug of war between Saudi Arabia and Iran. Therefore, it's not time. It is time. It is time to talk about these things. Creation of new political parties that have women at the forefront, creating an empowering environment, helping to lobby for changes in laws that impact women. I mean, you need support at every single level. And there are things happening. We're both aware of different initiatives that are taking place where actually younger men and women are at the forefront. And this is a partnership between a younger generation of men and women who are at the forefront of saying, we want a better Lebanon and we're going to do it together. It's no longer about gender equity. It's the kind of country that we want and that we want to have that includes women as a de facto fact of life.
Thank you, Maha. I'll give the floor to questions to the audience. Do you have a mic anywhere? Je vous en prie.
Ajouter quelque chose. Et il faut aussi encourager les femmes à le faire parce qu'il faut qu'elles sortent du groupe. La société est une pression. Lorsque pendant si longtemps, les femmes n'ont pas été en politique comme ça, c'est le groupe qui vous empêche aussi d'y aller parce qu'il faut sortir du groupe. Et il faut pouvoir faire un travail de sensibilisation aussi sur les femmes, les encourager à y aller. Ça, c'est très important.
Can I just add one thing?
C'est un peu le rôle des hommes hein, de le faire.
Absolument.
Absolument. Municipal elections are very important because they are the first place where people can make a difference and where people make a change. And I think women can play leading roles in making a difference in their own communities.
Okay, any questions? Yes. Paula Yaoubian. Yes, we will get you a microphone. Done.
Hello. Okay. Good morning, everyone. I hate to be moderating after you. You're such a charismatic moderator. I have a question for Sigrid.
Look who's talking.
Thank you. I have a question for you.
Sigrid.
Hello. How are you? Well, it's about diversity and inclusion. We see the United Nations engage in politics highly in our country, but when it comes to including women, when it comes to diversity and inclusion, we don't see a real lobbying for that. So since we have you in our country, and it's a great opportunity, I know how enthusiastic you are about it, what are you doing for women's role, for women's quota, for imposing it on Lebanon, on our government, on our institutions? Thank you.
Yeah. Well, imposition is not part of the equation. But it's hopefully persuasion and reminder. We're working with a number of women's NGOs and with politicians to push for a quota of women in the municipal elections, and we're aiming for the national elections. We have leverage and we're trying to use it. It's clearly not visible yet because it hasn't worked, but it means we're very consistent on message. Now, as you know as well, in diplomacy, it's a fine line between all the time public and becoming a broken record and working the floor, working with NGOs, doing the training. We're heavily involved in the campaign Women in Front to prepare for the municipal elections. We're working on their advocacy. We're doing it at many, many, many levels. We also want to train female candidates. So all of you who know people in the upcoming municipal elections, first we need to make sure they happen. Security will always be a reason, but it seems important enough that they happen. There's a democratic deficit on 2 levels if they don't, because there's no representation, and if women are not included, the democratic and rights deficit is glaring. So that's our push. We're working on it, so thanks for my little publicity moment here. We're working on it, but we need everybody to walk with us. And that is, I think, what the minister said. We need women to encourage women and not say, well, you know what, there's the cousin of so-and-so who's also running. I personally also have little time for women who discourage other women and saying, well, she is the relative of so-and-so. With all due respect, it seems, particularly in Lebanon, everybody is a relative of someone, and we don't hold it against the men. So support the women, push them, vote for them, and then also vote, and if they don't make it, that's okay. Once tried, next time you'll be lucky. It's like job applications. You don't always get the job you apply for, but something else happened. We need to trigger a movement that is sustained, supported, and sustainable. And I know you'll be right with us, so let's do that again on TV as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary. Did you mention national elections?
I did.
Forgot what it means.
I did. That's our other thing.
Any other question? Voilà, c'est bon. Please.
No, it wasn't a question. I just wanted to mention that in the, I can't remember exactly the year, there was an amendment for the municipal election, for a quota in the municipal elections. 1 woman for 9 members, 2 for 12, and 3 for 24. And it did not work, and I'm sorry to say that at that time, except for Linda of Linda Matter, women were not very supportive. And I worked a lot on that, and I could not succeed. Whereas it was the first step for a quota, because in municipalities you don't have confessional quotas. So take it back, because let's start small, but at least they have to move.
Yeah, if I may add, exactly based on what you were saying, we had, yes, exactly, but then at a later stage we had a discussion at the level of the cabinet, and the cabinet endorsed a draft law imposing quota. But when it reached the parliament, it stopped. And I fully agree that we need to put it forward, even if we don't have the law. In 2016, we can make it happen through some pressure groups, through some coalitions that could really push this reform forward. Any other question?
Yes, right here.
Please.
Regarding the Syrian refugee crisis, whether in Lebanon or abroad, is anything done around family planning? Because obviously these women are bringing into this world more children. There are more refugees being born into these really underprivileged circumstances, but also it's preventing these women from maybe working. We know women make excellent entrepreneurs. So is anything being done around that?
Thank you. Susan?
I know UNFPA has clinics, but they're mainly in refugee camps, and this is where the UN functions most. But I'm not sure. I have to check back on host communities, what's being done in Jordan and Lebanon. I don't know if, Sigrid, you know if something's happening in Lebanon.
No, I mean, family planning is part of the overall program. We don't single out refugee or non-refugee. A lot of it, as you suggested, is at the socio-economic bottom, where the poor tend to have more children, with the idea that the children will go out to work, and it's a self-fulfilling recycling poverty, and a lot of family planning is targeting that. But there is no differentiation between refugees. What we do know is those who have limited access to health care, the women in particular, the incidences of unwanted pregnancies may be on the rise because they are not in a regular health care provision pattern. And secondly, of course, there is insufficient support when the rate of gender-based violence goes up, including rape. And I think that is the bigger concern that we have currently.
Thank you.
Can I just... Hello?
Maha, please.
Just on entrepreneurship, there are quite a few programs also that are happening, whether through the UN or other NGOs, that are encouraging entrepreneurship for both men and women. particularly to help them become self-sufficient and not completely dependent on aid.
Mike here, please.
Je vais m'adresser en français à Madame Benguigui. On parle de l'immigration des Syriens, mais c'est un fléau qui a atteint le monde entier, pas seulement cette partie du monde, le Moyen-Orient, mais également nous sommes en train de suivre de très près ce qui se passe même en Europe. Comment les pays européens sont en train de traiter le sujet, parce que un jour on entend qu'ils ouvrent leurs portes, le lendemain, les portes sont fermées et les immigrants sont rejetés. Quelle est l'influence de ce phénomène sur la politique interne dans les différents pays, surtout que maintenant, par exemple comme en France, comment ce sujet est en train d'avoir son impact sur la préparation des élections présidentielles, par exemple?
Alors, c'est pour moi la question. Oui. Alors la France a toujours eu une politique, on va dire, opaque de l'immigration. La France a eu des colonies. Au moment des indépendances, la France a dû gérer une immigration de travail voulue. Mais c'était une immigration d'hommes seuls. Jusque dans les années 70, premier choc pétrolier, donc des raisons économiques, on décide d'arrêter massivement l'immigration de travail, l'immigration d'hommes seuls, et on va décider, c'est le gouvernement Chirac avec Valéry Giscard d'Estaing comme président, on va décider de faire le regroupement familial massivement, c'est-à-dire qu'on va faire venir des milliers de femmes. Ce n'est pas le choix des femmes, elles vont devoir venir rejoindre des maris qu'elles ne connaissaient pas. Et à partir de 70, nous savons qu'à partir du moment où les femmes sont ramenées, on va dire déracinées, elles ne repartiront plus jamais. Elles vont, ça s'appellera l'immigration de peuplement. Alors que l'immigration de travail, c'est une noria. Les hommes ont des contrats, ils vont, ils viennent, ils ne s'installeront pas. Pour des raisons économiques, en France, on a créé massivement. Après, il y a eu le deuxième choc pétrolier, les problèmes de chômage, et nous connaissons, vous connaissez les histoires de banlieues françaises, de milliers d'enfants qu'on n'a pas vus arriver. Nous n'avons pas imaginé qu'ils allaient grandir, naître en France, etc. On a tenté de les ramener, c'est-à-dire de décider de leur donner à l'époque l'équivalent de 1 000 € pour ramener toute la famille et repartir. Ça a été un échec total, mais on a, dans l'histoire de France, on porte cette histoire d'immigration. Est-ce que les enfants d'immigrés sont des Français, ne sont pas des Français, et arrivent. Donc cette histoire, elle commençait à émerger en France, la visibilité des enfants de l'immigration, et pour la plupart des musulmans, puisque la dernière immigration de travail était musulmane, algérienne, ensuite sénégalaise, malienne, etc. On a vu en France une composante de la société française finalement que l'on ne connaissait pas. On commençait à peine à la voir qu'il y a eu les problèmes d'immigrés, mais réfugiés. Et ça, les Français, ils ne comprennent pas. Ils ne comprennent pas du tout. Il y a de très mauvaises informations. D'un point de vue électoral, on ne sait pas comment gérer l'immigré, déjà celui qui est là depuis 3 générations, mais celui qui arrive pour des raisons, voilà, on fuit un pays, on fuit une guerre, On a commencé avec les Balkans. C'est la première fois que la France doit digérer cette histoire qui pose un vrai problème parce que, comme vous le savez, ces immigrés ne veulent pas rester en France. Les réfugiés ne veulent pas. Non, ils veulent aller en Angleterre. C'est pour ça que je vous parle vraiment de la France. Ils refusent de rester en France. Mais les autres pays ne veulent pas les accepter. C'est le problème de l'Angleterre. Ils ne veulent pas, les réfugiés syriens, afghans, etc., ne veulent pas de la France. Mais la France ne veut pas d'eux non plus. Sauf qu'ils sont, de fait, bloqués sur le sol. Et l'espace humain, entre guillemets, ce que pouvaient dire dans les années 70 certains philosophes, etc., sur la dimension humaine du réfugié, de l'immigré, n'existe plus. Aujourd'hui, il y a un vrai cas en France, c'est un groupe, voilà. Mais, sauf que nous, ces réfugiés ne veulent vraiment pas rester en France. Ah. Les Français ne veulent pas rester en France. Hein.
D'autres raisons.
C'est pas mal, c'est une bonne question.
Ne parlons pas fiscalité maintenant. Hein. Ne parlons pas fiscalité. Madame.
Mr. Bahrut, women in politics in Lebanon. It might definitely not be the right timing for this question in view of the political situation in Lebanon.
It is.
But do you think that civil marriage, if it was instituted in Lebanon, would help the women play a bigger role in society, in the political arena?
Definitely. It's one of many other things that would help. Civil marriage for sure, electoral law, quota, too many other things. And I believe that this is a culture we need to put in place. It's a matter of, it's a long-term process. I mean, civil marriage would give room to non-confessional approach on many fields. So yes, I fully agree. One last question.
Hello. Yes, hi.
Yes.
My name is Munir Nabti. I had a quick question about it came up a bit before about the role of men. And I'm curious how we can help get a situation stronger with this issue where there are more men fighting for women's rights, just like we need more straight people fighting for gay rights. We need more Christians in Christian-dominated countries fighting for Muslim and majority rights, and in Muslim-majority countries, more Muslims fighting for Christian and minority rights. If we don't feel like these are human rights issues that we're all fighting for, then we're going to end up with no animal rights, no trees, and no justice. So how do we help build momentum for the non-minority groups?
Thanks very much. In a way, you've answered the question. I think if looking at power politics, at the moment this is a situation of power politics, change only happens when the majority is with you. You need a vocal minority to keep pushing, to speak to the issues, to lead by example, but we need the majority, in this case the men, to be part of that equation. So I think it can be advocacy, it can be political support, it can be financing of movements. There are 50,000 ways to tackle it. But this is why the UN came up actually fairly belatedly with the He for She campaign. And it's all about men's voices of encouragement, support, men giving a space for a woman, for instance, saying, you know what, I don't need to have this seat. I know an equally qualified female candidate. Why not? Individuals can make a change the same as men in positions of influence and access to power need to lead by example. And I think those who vote for these men or women should also vote with a gender lens. Look at what they've done on gender issues or LGBT, whatever it is, animal rights, conservationism, the whole spectrum of human rights. But it's absolutely right, 21st century, if 50% of the population is ignored, we're kidding ourselves. So power to you, and I'll come back and talk to you. I hope you live in Lebanon. Thank you very much.
Now you have a new recruit for your project. I'm sorry, we're out of time. I'll take one question. You decide.
Okay, my arm hurt. Hi, I'm Talar Demirjan, and I see in front of me 4 beautiful and very successful women who work in international affairs. And as a young woman who is starting her professional career, I studied a non-stereotypical for a female role, which is counterterrorism and security. And I wanted to ask 4 of you, how did you start your careers? How did you make people take you seriously? Because I can't find any other room except this to ask this question and have brilliant answers. So please enlighten me.
Let me tell you that you already started by asking this question. Please.
Well, very short. With great difficulty, I have to tell you. I mean, it's basically trying to prove yourself over and over and over and over again, and you have to be willing to do that over and over. You have to be working hard 24/7. And I think your generation is even luckier than ours. I'm looking now, we're doing this whole thing with engagement with youth, and we're seeing that the differences amongst youth now and how they view women, whether it's boys, young men and young women, but also women. We did this whole project the other day in Jordan, and to my surprise, 99% of those who stood up and presented were women, while men were hiding in the background. So I think you're coming in a time where you might work less than all of us here, for sure, because with me it was very hard. I started as a journalist at 21 years old, and it was between my undergrad and my grad, and I went to an Arab country, straight from the US, and I worked as a journalist. So I'm sure there are lots of journalists here and can tell you how hard it is for a 21-year-old girl coming back to the Arab world to work as a journalist. Very difficult. You have to prove yourself, you have to fight stereotypes, whether it's sexual stereotypes or the idea that they can tell you how to write the story, the fact you're too weak. But through a lot of work, it works. And I'm sure you'll have a better and easier time than we did. Thanks.
Thank you, Susan, and thank you for joining us on this panel. Mahab. Yes, we'll get back to you if please. Micro.
I think by being you, and I think Ziad is absolutely right. You've already started to answer this question by standing up here. Frankly, proving yourself, yes, over and over again, being serious about what you do, and making fun of the stereotypes that they pose on you. Going at it with a sense of humor, I think, always helps. Not allowing the sometimes boxes that others attempt to put you in to actually to actually bring you down. Refuse to be in that box and just give it all that you can. You're a woman, but you're also a human being with fantastic capacities. So just go out and fulfill them.
Thank you, Maha, and thank you for your remarks on this panel. Madame Senora,
I just want to add, to say something about making a campaign for women to support women, because I feel that the main adversary of women is the woman. And this is something that we have to keep it in our lives.
Thank you.
Maybe we can start at home with mothers and how they treat their boys different than girls. I think this is the first start. But I also want to say for the young girls, sorry, to add one more small thing. Don't think of yourself, know that you're a woman. Don't be ashamed of being a woman, but go out to the labor force as a person, as a human being. And that helps a lot, because it won't define you.
Good.
Yeah, just 3 things. Take risks, be bold, and trust your instincts. And when you trust your instincts, you tend to do the right thing, even if it includes failure. Oh. And maybe one anecdote, and a 30-second one. In Syria, when I led on the chemical weapons disarmament mission, also not your typical, yet field of anyone's affairs, actually, the Syrians called me Arjul min al-Rijal. And I didn't take it as an insult, because I knew what they meant. I was androgynous to them. It was the function and the influence of the function that had to impose respect. So sometimes be Arjul min al-Rijal, but never copy the men's games. Have your own game. Thank you.
Thank you.
Alors moi, j'aimerais juste vous dire que lorsque je suis devenue réalisatrice, donc je suis née en France, je suis d'origine algérienne, Eh bien, savez-vous, et je n'en tire aucune gloriole, je suis la première femme cinéaste en France d'origine maghrébine, d'origine étrangère. Dans les années 80, il n'y avait aucune femme cinéaste issue de l'immigration. Dans les pays d'origine, il y avait des réalisatrices, mais en France, aucune. Alors, déjà, ça en dit long sur notre histoire française avec la composante issue de l'immigration. 2, ça en dit long aussi sur les femmes et le cinéma. Moi, je suis documentariste, donc il y avait à cette époque-là que 7 femmes réalisatrices. Et moi, je faisais partie de la première issue de l'immigration. Donc, toutes les portes se fermaient avec les thèmes que je voulais filmer. Et j'ai trouvé une phrase. On me disait toujours « non, ce n'est pas possible ». Parler des femmes musulmanes, parler de l'immigration, parler de les conséquences des jeunes beurs engagés dans l'armée de métier. Qu'est-ce que ça voulait dire? Comment ils allaient se battre face à d'autres musulmans? Non, non, ce n'est pas possible. Donc, j'ai prévenu mes équipes et j'ai dit, lorsqu'on entend « non, ce n'est pas possible », ça veut dire top départ.
Bravo. Well, Sigrid, as you said, you have your game, and the game is not over yet. I would like to thank May and the team for refreshing the screen. Yes, we're going through tough times, but women are still at the forefront of those tough times. Before, allez-y.
Moi, je voudrais juste avoir l'avis de Madame Zora Driss, qui est sur la femme tunisienne dans la Révolution. Elle est députée, elle a une autre histoire, mais je voudrais juste, puisqu'on est sur le panel politique, savoir si elle peut nous répondre. Comment avez-vous fait déjà pour être la femme mythique, c'est-à-dire que vous êtes...
Micro, s'il vous plaît.
Ah.
Non, c'est bon.
La génération de vos mamans, vous êtes celle qui avait effectivement, vous êtes battue pour le droit des femmes dans les toutes premières générations. Vous avez été le modèle de la femme indépendante dans le monde arabe. Et ensuite, au moment de la révolution du printemps arabe, on a vu émerger aussi une femme. Et on n'a pas compris lorsque ces hommes qui sont arrivés au pouvoir à vos côtés ont décidé dans le premier lieu de vous retirer du droit. Mais vous ne vous êtes pas laissé faire.
Tout à fait.
Avec une constitution qui a gardé les acquis.
Voilà.
Si alors très vite, oui, tout à fait. Très vite, moi, je voudrais dire que la Tunisie a toujours connu de grandes dames, à savoir la reine Didon qui fonda Carthage, la reine Didon qui est phénicienne, qui fonda Carthage 9 siècles avant Jésus-Christ. Et tout à fait. Donc nous sommes cousins quelque part. Et juste après l'indépendance, on a eu la chance d'avoir un président visionnaire, le premier président de la République tunisienne, Habib Bourguiba, qui a instauré le statut personnel de la femme, ce statut qui donne à la femme toute sa citoyenneté, à savoir, il a aboli la polygamie, la répudiation, les femmes ont droit de divorcer, elles ont aussi le droit d'avorter sans l'autorisation du mari ou du père, elles ont le droit de vote. Les femmes en Tunisie, depuis 60 ans, ont eu autant de droits que les hommes. Actuellement, et pour vous donner une idée, 62% des jeunes diplômés qui sortent des facultés, c'est des filles. Et on voit que nous avons, par exemple, sur la tête du patronat tunisien, nous avons une femme. Sur la tête, la présidente des juges, c'est une femme. Des avocats, c'est une femme. Des pharmaciennes, c'est une femme. Voilà. Et puis, on a fait une constitution qui a obligé la parité. Donc, actuellement, au Parlement, on est à peu près 33% de femmes. Alors, très vite, juste après la Révolution et avec l'arrivée des islamistes, on a vu que nos droits féminins ont failli être bafoués, ébranlés et puis la femme a tenu bon, la société civile aussi. On a fait de grands sit-ins, celui du Bardo qu'on appelle... celui du Bardo, où la femme et la société civile sont restées pendant 25 jours. Il y avait des jours où il y avait 450 000 personnes, dont plus que la moitié de femmes, qui ont dormi, qui ont passé des jours et des jours jusqu'à ce que les islamistes non, pas respectent la loi, décident de partir d'une façon pacifique. Et ce qui nous a fallu le prix Nobel de la paix. Voilà.
Bravo. OK. Tout à fait. Sur une note positive, justement, I would like to thank the distinguished panelists, and I'll give the floor to Rula, and we'll resume.
قبل بدي اتشكركم اكيد. بدي كمان ادعي الجميع لتشاركونا بتغريداتكم على تويتر على الهاشتاج WOFL 2016 واكيد بنهايه هذا اللقاء رح يكون في سحب لاسماء او افضل تغريدتين وجائزتين من روسونيرو. بدي كمان ادعي الجميع كمان. نحن بعرف انه تاخرنا شوي بس بعد شوي رح يكون في عنا وقفه مع البريك. هلا رح يكون في فقره خاصه مع بكي أندرسون وهي مذيعة أخبار بالCNN والمقدمة السابقة لبرنامج بزنس انترناشونال والمقدمة الحالية لبرنامج كونكت ذا وورد. وتدير هذه الجلسة الإعلامية بتلفزيون مستقبل بولا يعقوبيان. تفضل.